Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast.
Welcome back. We're obviously taking a break from our Grand Prix coverage and just kind of jumping back into our kind of deep dive into the history and the parts of the cars. So just a regular old episode.
I know, I feel like we haven't done one of these in a little while, but I know we did one right before the Italian Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of like a prep for the Japanese Grand Prix that's coming up this weekend.
Yeah.
So, I know you've got an interesting driver ready for us for Driver of the Week.
Yeah, it's definitely, we're going to keep on the theme of Japan, Japanese, and just focus on, that section of the world in terms of my driver. And someone who, whose home race is technically where the Japanese Grand Prix is this upcoming weekend. It should be an exciting one. I'm sure we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will.
What about you? What part are we going to be going on?
So, this past weekend at the Singapore Grand Prix, one of the big issues that the Red Bulls were having during qualifying and practice, I noticed, was Max kept talking about how difficult the upshifts and downshifts were, and so I figured I would talk about the gearbox and talking about shifting gears and everything and how they actually do it, because it's not obviously your typical car that we drive every day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into that. And then for our shop talk today, we are talking about speed traps.
Yeah, super simple in theory and I feel like execution, but just something that when you're looking at a circuit map, a lot of times they'll have DRS zones, but then they'll also have the speed traps. So just another, section of the course of what a Grand Prix weekend, hot words, hot topics, just something that, I don't know, for some reason I thought it was more complicated than it is.
I actually thought it was something completely different than what it actually is. And when I was looking it up, I was like, well, I had that one wrong, so.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had an idea. Maybe it dealt more with regulations and whatnot and less about what it actually is about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I was thinking more in the sense of civilian roads and civilian drivers, oh, there's a speed trap up ahead, with cops and whatnot.
Oh, I didn't think about it that way. We had different thoughts, but we'll get into that more when we have our little shop talk segment towards the end. But for now, let's get into the driver of the week.
Yeah. So the driver that we're going to be bringing to you this week is Satoru Nakajima. Satoru Nakajima was born on February 23rd, 1953 in Okazaki, Japan. He is still alive. I feel like the last few drivers have been throwing it back very far back, and some of them aren't alive. They're not with us today. But Nakajima still is. So a little bit about his early life. He began pretty early. A few of the accounts that I read said that he enjoyed to, race with his brother and his family's garden. I believe he just grew up in farmland outside of a major city, so nothing really crazy. He began his racing career when he finished school and finally got his license. And he seemed to kind of just circulate the Japanese racing scene. Nothing really crazy, more rookie level, not as high up as F1. In 1973, so when he was 20, he was a rookie in the 1973 Suzuka Circuit Series. I tried to look into this, and there was nothing really clear. I don't know if it's similar with other, I feel like country-specific racing scenes, but it seems like a lot of the titles of the Japanese, not only teams, but the I don't know, like Super Formula, things like that. They all renamed several times throughout the years. Levels, I guess, levels of racing.
Like series?
Series, yeah. And so I tried to look into the Suzuka circuit, and from what I could kind of tell, this was just like a circuit-specific racing series that happened at Suzuka, which, for those that don't know, is where this weekend's Grand Prix is happening. So that's kind of the first account of him being on, like, a bigger field. 5 years after this, he won his first race in Japanese Formula 2, known today as Super Formula. So just to kind of explain certain levels of racing, Liam Lawson, who just raced for AlphaTauri, came from Super Formula. So I think it's Japan specific. I'm not sure if it's all of Southeast Asia, but it's just the league, I guess.
I think it's
racing.
just in Japan, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So back then, in the late 70s, 80s, it was known as Japanese Formula 2. In 1981, this saw him win his first championship, and he continued to dominate the field, winning 5 of the next 6 F2 championships. So he really dominated. At this time in history, Honda was kind of at their peak with their engines. They were really, they loved Nakajima. They really enjoyed him as a racer. And then, so he's doing all of this racing. He's conquering in Formula 2. And then April 12th, 1987, Nakajima made his first F1 debut at the Brazilian Grand Prix. The team he debuted with was Lotus, and at this time, Senna, who, if anyone that's listening is big into history of racing, he's a name you're going to hear all the time. I think we're going to do a whole episode dedicated to him, but he's a very, very big name in the F1 world.
Yeah, just to step in really quickly.
Yeah.
While we were on vacation, this is a little sidetrack as well. While we were on vacation, while we were on the plane going to our trip, we both watched the Senna documentary because it was one of the options on the plane, and we both finished it around the same time, and we were bawling our eyes out. I think Ayrton Senna is one of those people, and the Senna documentary that, like, you just have to look into, you have to watch, and I think that it teaches you a lot about what the sport was at the time that Senna was racing and how different it is now. But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, the time that Nakajima is racing and Senna is racing, it's a completely different ballgame than what you're seeing today. I feel like kind of Senna is the overarching, safety regulations reason.
Yeah.
So lots of importance, but we're going to do a whole episode probably on him and his achievements. But yeah, so Satoru Nakajima debuts with Lotus, Senna being his teammate. And he did decently. During this season, though, he was drastically outperformed by Senna. Senna, I guess the comparison you can make is like a Max Verstappen, like just that.
It's hard to be a teammate of someone who's constantly
a world
winning
champion.
And who is... I mean, Lotus was the first team that Senna was on, I'm pretty sure, or maybe the second team, and Senna was just, like, he is one of the greats of F1, so it's got to be hard being his teammate.
So, the other problem is, too, at this time, there was a lot of speculation in the paddock, within the tabloids, and within spectators, that he might have just been there because of his relationship with Honda, who were supplying the engines for Lotus at this point. Honda, so this is all obviously like historical hearsay, who knows the truth of this, but Honda reportedly were pushing for him to join Williams in 1986, so a year before that Brazilian Grand Prix debut. But Frank Williams wouldn't give up on his drivers Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet. Lotus was looking for a new engine after Renault pulled out of F1 and Honda swept in. Take it with a grain of salt. Who knows if it was one? I mean, I'm sure there's people out there who've seen the contracts, but that's kind of why there was always speculation. I mean, Nakajima, he was middle towards bottom of the pack, you know? It was a tight race at this point, and there were a lot of big names, and, you know, I think he couldn't ever meet the same equivalent level of racing as, you know, his teammate and future teammates. So that's in 1987, and then in 1988, Senna leaves Lotus, and Nelson Piquet, who, fun fact, Max Verstappen's girlfriend is his daughter, Kelly. Nelson Piquet became his teammate. During the 1988 Japanese Grand Prix, he found out that his mother had just passed right before Friday morning's practice session. Everywhere I said was basically, like, he found out that his mom... So, like, I'm pretty sure 1988 was still at Suzuka. I think it changed, like, maybe a few times, the race courses, but... So that's his home race course, where, like, he started racing. And then he finds out in his, like, second F1 season ever that his mom passes 30 minutes before. Something similar was when Charles Leclerc's dad died. I mean, there have been some incredible performances post-horrific news. And, you know, a lot of people were thinking that he was going to pull out, and rightfully so. After a tough season and finding out about his mother's passing, the next day saw him qualifying right behind his teammate Piquet, who was in 5th place, and then Nakajima was in 6th. This was a big deal, and it got him a ton of coverage. James Hunt was a huge hater, apparently. Not sure how true that is. I wasn't there. But apparently he just got a ton of just, like, dedication and, like, pats on the backs for his success. 1989... Sorry, I don't know what my note just said. 1989, Lotus re-signed him. Ironically, Honda stopped supplying their engines. 88 was the last year that Honda supplied their engines, so...
The rumors can't be true then.
So, like,
I mean,
Honda...
even if he originally went to Lotus because of Honda, Lotus re-signed him, so, like, the rumors can... go die.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of funny that he was still signed even when, you know, apparently people believe that he was only there because of the engine supplier, but Nakajima and Piquet were teammates again, and honestly, it was an all-over season for Lotus. They were up and down. It was a bit of a mess. But the highlight of Nakajima's season was during the 1989 Australian Grand Prix. That year was known for just, like, the course being soaked. Like, it was flooded, it was a mess. I believe, like, at one point, Prost pulled out, and, like, his car, like, there was a lot of drama surrounding the 1989 Australian Grand Prix. Definitely look it up.
And I feel like drama at this point in F1 was, like, political drama. Like, the FIA, politically...
Yeah,
was very corrupt.
I mean, especially after watching the documentary, we saw a side of, like, the whole racing world back then, and it just seemed, I mean, I hate to say, it just seemed sloppy.
Yeah,
like,
it was messy.
And maybe, like, the transparency is good, because there are things that happen today that we're not aware of. It just seems like people were just constantly, like, angry, and it was really, like, PR teams didn't seem to exist.
No, I actually don't think they did.
So... he spun out early in the first lap after the restart because I think it was a mess. I think, like, the amount of people that crashed or DNF'd in this, it was crazy. So the grid was bigger than 20 people, and I think almost 18 people DNF'd. Like, it was insane.
Oh my goodness.
He climbed his way up the grid with all of these retirements, which was shocking because when he spun out in that first lap, he ended up in dead last. Like, he spun out right at the restart. And ended up in dead last, but maybe it was a good thing that he was away from everyone, because it was just a shit show. There were, like, it seemed like there were cars everywhere, everything was soaked.
And then he just got to cruise on past?
So there was a crap ton of these retirements, and then he ended up with a 4th place finish and the fastest lap.
Love that for him.
So, like, I think only 8 drivers ended up finishing.
Okay, but he still beat some drivers.
And he got fastest lap.
Yeah.
And this also just won him a ton of praise. Unfortunately, this was the only race of that year that he scored points, and this equaled his career best. In the 1987 British Grand Prix, he did really, really well. And I think that was one of those, like, early races in his career that people were predicting him to be just, like, a knockout star. 1990 saw him joining the team Tyrrell and was there for 2 pretty quiet seasons, always outperformed by his teammates, something that seemed to just follow him around wherever he was. And then around 1993, there was a Honda F1 team in the works. They debuted their car with Nakajima. They were working on these things. Like, it seemed like he was the face of this new Honda team. But then, ultimately, Honda decided to scrap the project in 94. They came out with 3 cars. I didn't look at them, but they came out with 3 types of cars, and Nakajima debuted the first version of it. And kind of after that, I think, he wasn't re-signed, and he just kind of went off to do his own thing. And that was the last time he was really in the F1 world. Today, Nakajima still owns the Nakajima Racing Team, which is a super formula team. They've won the championship 3 times. It seems like he started that in the, mid-'80s.
Okay.
And then his son, Kazuki Nakajima, was an F1 driver for Williams, which is a name we know today, during the 08 and 09 seasons.
Wait, that's really interesting that his son was a Williams driver when he was originally potentially going to be a Williams driver.
Yeah, when Frank Williams was like, no, the guys that I have are the guys I'm gonna keep.
Interesting.
Yeah. Kind of full circle moment, I'm sure, for him and his family. His other son, I'm pretty sure this is how you pronounce it, but I'm probably wrong. Daisuke Nakajima was a driver as well, racing in British Formula 3, Super Formula, and Super GT. And then I think the biggest reason why we talked about Nakajima today was he was the first full-time Japanese F1 driver. So just kind of think about that. 1987, 1988, that's the first time we see a Japanese driver on, full-time.
Well, and I feel like, so when we were deciding who the driver of the week was going to be, there were a few that we had gone over, and it was kind of difficult to choose specifically because I feel like, unfortunately, there hasn't been a ton of Japanese F1 drivers, and in the past, we've looked at drivers that have been really successful at specific courses, and that's the reason why we chose them as driver of the week. But this week, because there's not that many Japanese F1 drivers, we really wanted to highlight them. And hopefully in the future we can work and we can review some more.
Yeah, I definitely think it's important. Not only was he the first full-time Japanese F1 driver, but with that fastest lap, there are probably still drivers on the grid today who don't have fastest lap achievements. So he was the first Japanese driver to achieve fastest lap and to score points. So, he was the first guy in, but that doesn't guarantee that, he's going to be on the F1 circuit and scoring points, It doesn't always happen. And I also think it's just important to highlight, past drivers, see the history, see kind of why we're here today. I think a lot of drivers, incidents, courses, the reason why everything's set up today, you really see in the history of this sport.
Yeah.
I also think Suzuka, it's only been its first F1 Grand Prix, was in 2008. No. Oh my god, I'm thinking Singapore. Oh my god, my brain. But still,
the Suzuka circuit, I think, is
it's
one of the more historical
ones
in Asia. But I know that it's been a race course. At least the F1, it's been on the calendar for the last while.
Yeah, but I think that is so important to highlight the history, It's not just a European-based sport. There's so many other countries that love it and appreciate it, and you see it. It's such a worldwide sport coming together.
Well, and I wonder if because with him being the first Japanese F1 driver, he probably opened up the door for so many more to be able to be an F1 driver. Because I feel like if it wasn't for him, like, there's a lot of people who a lot of, like, younger Japanese kids who might not have ever gotten into F1.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it in a sport like soccer, the worldwide touch that it has in every country, and I think you can see that with certain drivers. I think, you see that with Yuki bringing in a certain crowd. You see that with, Checo bringing in, it's not just, fans, they have countries behind them.
Yeah.
And you see that in every driver. And so I also think it puts a sport that maybe not everyone would have paid attention to on the map. You know, that's what a lot of today's hopes for Logan Sargent was that he would bring in, like, an American fan base. And, I don't know, people are always proud of their country and proud to support, these kids who are achieving something incredible.
Oh, 100%.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think he has a really interesting career. It's quiet, but it's important.
Not everyone is a Senna, a Schumacher, like a Hamilton.
Well, and I don't think you need to be those guys to have importance. It was kind of sad when I was doing research. I found this website, and maybe it's not sad, maybe it's a really, like, positive thing, but I think it was, like, F1driversforgotten.com.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
And it was, like, about the obscure ones, which is awesome. Which is, like, great because sometimes it's hard. They have such short careers.
Yeah.
It's hard to find information. And, Nakajima had a pretty short F1 career in terms of, like, what we see today.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think it was, like, I clicked on it just to see, and it ended up being lots of, like, really, really helpful information. But, seeing the title of it, it's, like, and that's kind of why I think we're doing this, too, is because, like, they're not forgotten. There's such a big pool of drivers. It's such an not older, I mean, like, there's obviously significantly older sports, but there's been so many guys who have been through this.
Yeah.
But, I just think that there's an importance to knowing a little bit of history of where we're going to and a little bit of history of the sport.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, now we are going to go into the part of the week. Gearboxes. We have them sort of-ish in our own cars that we drive every single day. But in F1 cars, they are definitely different. So when we first started watching F1, I was unsure if F1 cars were automatic or manual, and then I was looking up the difference between F1 and IndyCar, and it said something about IndyCar being manual and F1 being automatic. I have to learn a little bit more about IndyCar to confirm if that's true about IndyCar, but for F1, they're not actually automatic. They're like a semi-automatic kind of thing.
It's not manual in the sense, like, there's not a stick shift and all that. It's just...
No, but there's... Yes, but no.
Okay.
So, basically, it's called a sequential gearbox now. And so the difference between that and like a stick shift that we have in our own cars, and a stick shift in a regular car, it's going to be, you're going to have your clutch, and then you're going to have to actually like shift gears while you're pressing down on the clutch. While you're pressing down the clutch, I think. I don't know how to drive stick.
I was like, when did you learn to drive stick?
I think that's how you change.
Who are you trying to press?
I think that's how you change gears in a stick shift.
God, every mechanics, or like every driver's gonna hear this and just start screaming.
I think that's how you change gears in a stick shift. But in an F1 car, the clutch, from what I could understand, is like a button on the steering wheel. And you don't have, what is it, in a regular car? The actual stick to like...
I'm going blank here. Oh my god.
I'm blanking on what it's called.
The stick in the middle of your car that you
use to change gears. Yeah, that. So they don't actually have that. Instead, they have they just call them paddles, and it's on the backside of their steering wheel. And one of them is the upshift, and the other is the downshift. And so when Max in the Singapore Grand Prix was complaining about upshifts and downshifts, it was meaning he was having a hard time changing gears up or down. The only time that they ever have to use the clutch is when the car is currently in neutral. So like at a standing start, when they're just standing there, they then have to press the button for the clutch, and then it's out of neutral, and everything after that is like a computerized version of it.
Okay.
So that they don't have to actually have another pedal in the car to press down on. I think that happened within the last 15 to 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess how many times they change gears through one race?
How, is it a really big number?
Yeah, it's a really big number.
Okay, it's not going to be, 3 times. No.
No.
1,500 times.
On average, people change gears 3,600 times in one race. And so they're hitting the paddles constantly.
think about their speed is constantly changing. It's all the corners.
That's the thing. The point of the gearbox is to essentially help you change gears. It is the part in the car that actually changes the gears, and that then translates to the engine. And the amount of torque or power that it's pushing out. And so obviously as you're braking and you're turning, you have a big turn, you don't want your engine going full out, because then you're just the speed of your car is going to be insane. It shouldn't be like that. And so everything's constantly happening. So as they're braking, or say they're trying to pass someone, they're going to have to change gears. And you can actually hear it as you're watching a race. If you are watching a driver cam, you can legitimately hear when they're changing gears.
Can't you see the screen on their...
Yeah, on their steering wheel. They all have a screen, and if they are currently changing gears, it'll say what gear they're at. They don't have to, from what I can understand, they don't have to press the paddle a certain number of times. It's just if they press the upshift, they want to go up in gear, then the computer will automatically figure out what gear it needs to go into.
Okay.
And then it will go up. And so the drivers will know whether it needs to go up or down. They just have to press what paddle. And then, yeah, I could go into the details on the actual parts of a gearbox. I'll say what the names are, but some of it might be a bit complicated, and I might just throw these definitions in an Instagram post or even on a TikTok. I can throw them in there. But the gearbox has a number of unique parts. They are the sequential gear selector, so that's the chief component in any sequential gearbox. The paddles, like what I said before, on the back of their steering wheel. The selector forks, the collar or dog clutch, the gear selector, and the selector pins. All of these together make up the gearbox. I think there's a few other parts to the gearbox, I think there's a cover in it. I think they were calling it the cassette, from what I could tell. And the gearbox is located typically, where was it? It's bolted directly behind the engine. And again, that's because it has direct relation to the engine and involves the power that the engine's currently giving off. And then actually the rear suspension of the car is bolted directly onto the gearbox. And from what I remember, the shifts of gears, because of this computerized now, it's it can shift now in 0.5 milliseconds, and so that's why you don't feel the change of the gears how you would in a regular stick shift car, where you can actually feel yourself changing gears. In an F1 car, because it happens in 0.5 milliseconds, it's happening so quickly that it's just an automatic 1-2. Yeah.
Wow.
And so when Max was saying he was having a hard time with the upshifts and downshifts, I think they were just their engine was struggling, I'm guessing. But like the gearbox relating to the engine was struggling. And I think that's also what the problem was with Esteban Ocon and why he ended up DNFing the Singapore Grand Prix, because I think he wasn't able to shift it out of sixth gear from what I could remember seeing on his steering wheel. And so like his car just could not move anymore at that point. And I remember a couple of Grand Prix ago, Lando was talking about like how he couldn't get it even above like a certain gear.
Yeah.
And so they're constantly paying attention to it, but because they have to change gears so many times, that's why they have added the computerized aspect to it. Because if they had to step on the clutch and change it every single time, it would be too much for them to pay attention to and drive safely and compete at the same time.
I feel like it would be humanly impossible.
Well, and that's the thing, it's not possible.
Yeah, you need a computer.
Yeah, basically. So, I think I had a few more things about it. Just also for regulations, each driver gets 4 gearboxes per season. This is actually for sustainability purposes, but also gearboxes are some of the most expensive parts of a car. From what I could tell, they're like several million or like at least $1 million like for one. And so expense-wise, it's just ridiculous to have more than a certain number. And if you if you need more than 4, then you'll get a grid place penalty, which is what happened to Max Verstappen in, what was it?
I don't
The
remember.
Belgian Grand Prix?
It might be.
It was one of them. But he recently had that issue, and yeah. If you want to hear more about gearboxes, let me know, and I will go more into depth on it on social media. But I figured if I went into extreme depth right now, just by talking, it would probably be very confusing. So,
I think I only have one question. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but are gearboxes similar to engines where certain teams will use like a third-party supplier, or is this like they're all making their own?
I think
like, is there a specific like company that makes gearboxes, or
No, I think they're all making their own, but then I think you can like Haas, I'm pretty sure doesn't manufacture any of their own parts, and so they have to buy their stuff from other people. So I don't think everybody makes their own, but I think you can make your own. It was kind of hard to actually find information on gearboxes. They seem to be very, very secretive for some reason.
Not surprising.
Like way more secretive than engines. Like everybody has to, I'm pretty sure, every team is required to release like details about their power units, and no one's required to release details on their gearbox from what I can understand. They are heavily regulated though.
Yeah.
Like it's probably the second, other than gearboxes, other than power units, gearboxes are probably like the most highly regulated thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think now we can kind of get into the shop talk.
Totally. One thing I started to notice when I was doing the track information for all the Grand Prix was speed traps, and for some reason in my brain, I thought it was a lot more complicated than it actually is, but it seems to be, and I don't know how many articles you looked at or if any of them said it, but it seemed that a lot of people saw the value of speed traps, but also felt that this was a little bit of like archaic information.
Oh, I didn't see anything about that.
Especially based on the fact that these cards are becoming so computerized that a lot of them can collect their own data.
That makes sense.
But I did see like a really important point that like as to why they have them, but do you want to go ahead and just share what you found on speed traps?
Yeah, so just to explain what speed traps actually are, they are a point on the track where the top speed of an F1 car is measured by radar tech. I actually, when I first started looking at track maps and saw speed traps, I thought it was a point where it's like, this is where the, like, you're at such a high speed, but then, like, you're coming onto a turn, and so you, like, it's a speed trap. Like, the speed is trapped, and you have to slow down immediately.
It's a trap. No,
Okay,
I mean, well, and
the Monza one, I'm sorry, the speed trap is at the very end, which, that's the thing, the speed traps are at, to also explain where they are, the measurement point is typically placed at the fastest point of the longest straight on circuit, and a lot of them happen to be closer to the end of the long straight. And so when I was looking at the Monza map, I was like, oh, this is at the very end of the straight, and it's going straight into the first turn. So by speed trap, they have to slow down immediately in this spot.
Okay, so what I thought it was when I first read it, I thought it was, so, like, I don't know if this is, like, a universal English saying, but when you're taking long road trips, like, you'll have your Siri or whatever map app you have, and it'll be like, oh, heads up, like, a speed trap ahead. And that essentially is, like, there's cops monitoring there, like, watch your speed, control your speed, it's a speed trap. And I thought maybe it was, like, a section of the track that the FIA said you could only go a certain speed. I don't know. I feel like we were both so far away from what it actually is.
I mean, yours was kind of on the right track by thinking, like, your speed is being measured.
Yeah, but I thought it was, like, you had to go a certain speed. Like, everyone has to go 40 miles per hour. I don't know.
But the reason why the speed traps exist is because the information can help teams understand the car and to optimize differences in speeds between drivers and, like, for example, by making a driver push more at a specific point throughout the course. I can see why people don't think they're necessary anymore because you get all of that data already because of how computerized everything is. You're just constantly getting feedback. Not just from the drivers, but the car, and, like, all of the data is going through computers in your garages.
I do think so. So that was the biggest argument, was that there's so many computer aspects in F1 vehicles today. Are they necessary? That they're placed by the FIA. There tends to only be one. It's not a permanent location, so it can change year from year where that speed trap is. But for my mind, I feel like it's a controlled aspect of data. It's the same data that you're going to get from every single team.
That makes sense.
It's a FIA, and sometimes they make weird decisions, but I think that it's a consistent form of data that's used really well for comparison. I also think it's probably the easiest, best way to create records of how fast the car is going, and that's it. Essentially, it's just clocking the top speed. And I just think it's at the same place for every single team, and you know it's there. And so I think maybe it's archaic because it's all in the car and every team can pull that data themselves, but I don't know.
At the same time, though, I can't remember what year it was, but it was some point in the 2010s. That was the highest speed recorded, and it was our man Valtteri Bottas in a Williams. I don't remember where. I think it was Azerbaijan, maybe?
I thought it was Baku. Yeah.
Baku is Azerbaijan.
I know. My brain caught up with itself, and when I said it out loud, I realized Baku is Azerbaijan. Yeah. It was like 320 something.
No, it was like 374.
Yeah, it was 300. It's somewhere in the 300s of kilometers.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, that's scary.
I mean, it makes sense, though. They have to go that fast.
Yeah. But it's just, honestly, it's nothing crazy. It doesn't really affect the race. It's just, shocker, another collection of data.
We're seeing how fast you go at this point. Like,
yeah. And I don't know. I don't think they're talked about that much
I mean,
anymore,
obviously
if
not,
ever.
considering we both thought they were very different things.
Well, they're always on the maps when I'm doing the research. And
Yeah.
there's something. I mean, I don't know if people want us to mention if there's a speed trap. I think there is one on every track.
I'm pretty sure there is one.
Yeah, but if people want us to mention where it is, because that's the other thing, they're typically on straights, but from what I was reading, they have been on weird positions before. So
I wonder if they put them in weird positions every once in a while just to get a read on how fast people are going at that specific point.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
a little bit of data to look into if you're interested, per race. Let us know if you guys if you want us to pull that information for all you. We can post it onto socials.
We can probably find out how fast everybody was going, like their fastest speed at that speed trap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's speed traps in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We hadn't planned on talking about like prep for Japan, but do you have any comments since the Japanese Grand Prix is coming up?
No, I think it's going to be interesting. I think we talked about it a little bit last episode. I'm intrigued to see where the cards fall for certain teams.
Yes.
Williams, McLaren.
Our normal favorites.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what Red Bull says a week after, their performance in Singapore. I will say they didn't seem like sore losers, even though they didn't lose. They still placed well, but I'm interested to see. Yeah, I think it's just gonna be. I don't really know what to expect. We'll see.
Yeah, I think I'm interested to see like some of the teams like Ferrari, where we were really surprised this past weekend with how fast they were in Singapore. And I just have no idea how they're going to perform now in Japan, because going into this past weekend, I was like, it's going to be bad and it's going to be embarrassing. But then they ended up winning. So who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think it's anyone's game. And I say that and watch Max win it, but we'll see. It's a big race. A lot of people seem excited for it. Yeah.
Let's hope there's no rain.
Hey, I don't think we've had rain the last 2 races.
I know.
So
Fingers crossed.
let's keep it going, because I'm tired of the rain.
Yeah, me too.
But, well, we'll talk to you guys when we know the results and I'm sure, all of the ups and downs of the Japanese Grand Prix.
I think that's all for today. So, bye guys.
Talk to you soon.